Hello. Security issues will always be with us, such as the problems created by attacks from external threat actors. But is a new technology about to ride to the rescue in the form of artificial intelligence? I asked a range of industry experts to find out. What are the biggest threats facing the enterprise today, and what mistakes are enterprises making?
Certainly there's a lot of opportunities for disruption in the enterprise from a cybersecurity standpoint. I think one is just the sheer scale of the problem. There are over 50 billion connected devices today in the enterprise. That number, not quite as big, but still hard to get your hands around. It's devices that are owned by the company, devices that people bring into the company. So it's just the scale of the number of devices. The second one is keeping up with the pace of innovation from a cyber attack standpoint. There are so many cyber attacks that are appearing every single day, and trying to keep up with that is certainly a challenge for people and for enterprises. And I think the third one is people are gullible. Even today, I mean, people still click on things that they shouldn't be clicking on.
The biggest risk in security these days is two things, and it might sound very strange, but it's speed and it's volume. Speed, in the old days, if you got an exploit, it would take weeks or months before somebody exploited it and started a large-scale campaign to hack a lot of companies. Right now it can go down to 1 to 2 days, right? And the industry is not ready for that. Not only the security industry, but the customers aren't ready either. So that speed is killing everything off. Second problem is volume. Bandwidth computing is become so cheap through clouds and through high bandwidth environments that it's easy to get bandwidth, to get CPU and resources to start hacking systems. Passwords cracking is a lot easier. Cryptography cracking is a lot easier these days.
As the speed with which the threat landscape has evolved has only increased, so there's been a tendency for a bunch of little startups in garages, usually in Silicon Valley, but in a couple of other places as well, to come up with some sparkly new box, or at least some sparkly new technology, it may be software, and those spaces have frequently been then christened by somebody like Gartner with a 3-letter acronym. And then people like me then write about that, and then everybody starts to say to the enterprises, you really must go and buy one of these because they'll resolve your problem. And of course the startups themselves have got all their marketing and sales folks phoning in and saying, listen, you really do need to look at this because the existing vendors cannot address this new set of challenges. And there's an element of truth. I mean, clearly when DLP came along, data loss prevention, it came along to meet a need. I think we can say the same for a bunch of other technologies. I don't know, endpoint detection and response and user behavior analysis, all of these other little acronym things that popped up over the years. There was a real need for them because existing security infrastructure did not address the evolution of new threats. The trouble was that in order to address those threats, you then put in what they call a silo.
So I think biggest risks are the obvious risks, data loss, data sabotage, financial fraud, the things that we know. From a mistake perspective, I think, security is still seen as an IT problem, not a business risk. I think we failed as an industry to contextualize risk to a business. And I think that's some of the work that we've been doing, is how do we package that so an organization can comprehend the risk against their risk appetite. But I think the primary issue is it's an IT problem still. And until business get hold of it, we can't fix it.
How are mobile computing, IoT and cloud computing changing enterprise security?
If we go back to looking at the overall attack surface, IoT, mobile computing, and certainly cloud is just dramatically increasing the number of endpoints that sit within the enterprise environment. So it just massively increases the overall attack surface that we have to think about and deal with. And not all these devices are owned by the enterprise. Certainly in the case of mobile devices or an IoT devices, these are devices that you and I as employees walk into the building with every day, and then we connect it to the network, and the IT staff, the security staff don't know anything about it. So it's increasing the overall attack surface that we have to think about. I think also there's a challenge from a security standpoint in the industry today in that they're still not very well understood, especially as we talk about, mobile's pretty well understood, but IoT is, I think, still a term that people are trying to get their hands around. What does it mean from an enterprise perspective? You know, people are walking around, I mean, what types of devices should I expect to find in my enterprise environment that I have to deal with? And I think that's a challenge for the enterprises, just getting their head around what it means to them specifically, and then how do I address it, and how do we take care of it from a cybersecurity perspective?
We do an assessment of a company, and a lot of the change that you see as the perimeter and the fabrics starts to dissipate into the world, actually security doesn't go with it. So one of the challenges we see is organizations run projects which reduce costs to move to cloud, but do not make the investments in security to follow that, take the savings to the bottom line, but actually increase the security risk.
What types of security problems can AI solve? How can it do so? And will it save any money?
From an AI perspective, and as we look at it from a cybersecurity standpoint, I think there's two key areas that AI, or more specifically machine learning, can help us address as an industry. The first one, especially as we talk about it from an endpoint protection perspective, is what we call the protection gap. So today, traditional endpoint security models were very good at, once a piece of malware is found, we can write a signature for it, and then we can identify it in the future and protect against it or prevent it. But once that malware is found, it can take up to 2 weeks or even longer to actually create the signature for that, and then have that signature propagate out to everybody's laptop or their desktop devices. So we have this protection gap where we're not protected from that particular piece of malware. Machine learning can help solve that particular problem, because I can predict a file, I can predict the file is malicious and block it the first time, even though I don't know what that file is or I haven't seen it before. So that's one area. The other area is going to be in being able to protect against more than just file-based malware. Being able to actually protect against fileless attacks like trusted applications that have scripts or macros in those devices or in those files that may be malicious, or even being able to protect against in-memory attacks that are run on your individual device. And so really, at the end of the day, it's those two areas that I think machine learning is really making a difference from an endpoint protection standpoint.
The first thing everybody has to remember is AI is such a broad term that it sounds magical. And from the moment it sounds magical, you have to be careful with it, because you're going to attribute it stuff that it can't do. AI is basically just a tool. And at this time, we do three things. We do natural language processing, in which we're going to look into language and try to get meaning out of that. We do machine learning, which is basically statistics or data mining. And we do deep learning, which is using neural networks to learn information, right? Problem with that is that it has limited possibilities. You can do great things with it if you're very specific, but it's very difficult to get a general broad thing. So what we should do is use it as a tool, use it as a feature for something specific, develop it specific, and then make the life of the security officer easier with it.
How do you see AI changing the security landscape over the next few years?
It's not going to change the security landscape. It's just going to be an extra feature. It's going to be an extra piece of technology that makes things that are already there easier and more affordable. For instance, SIEM, Security Incident and Event Management, is so difficult to manage these days. Well, artificial intelligence can make that easier. Can clean up stuff for administrators, can automate certain easy, simple processes.
I think as organizations start to get control and understanding of their data, then they're then able to apply intelligence to it and automation. It's like, you know, I don't find in any other part of the business, you wouldn't put all your data into a bucket and ask something very clever to work out the anomaly. You'd understand it, and then you'd optimize it and automate it. So I think there's an element in security where organizations can't outsource the context and the understanding. They need to get that themselves and then use AI to instrument. The biggest problem with security that we see is resource. You know, organizations run everything as project. There's no operational resource, and operational risk is often what's being exploited. So until we get control and get the data into a form in the mass market, actually AI is a tick box in a vendor to sell something, unfortunately.
Thank you very much. So there we have it. Artificial intelligence will have a role. It's pretty important, but there are still some questions to be answered.